Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MtG Traders. My name is Taryn, and let's talk about the pre-release. So the Dominaria pre-release is coming soon. It's coming this weekend, in fact. And what is a pre-release? Well, if you've never been to a pre-release is basically the most casual way to play Magic other than just kind of opening packs and playing bulk. It's basically a giant gathering and celebration of a set coming out the week before it comes out, building a 40-card deck out of 6 packs, and then just having fun with a couple of rounds with friends at the local game store there. And what this video aims to do is be a quick primer on like what cards are good in common and uncommon for sealed, and then of course what to expect and what to bring to a pre-release. So I'm going to try and attempt to make this video as short as I possibly can, so let's get right into it, guys. First up, pre-release inventory. What do you get for attending a pre-release? So you'll get 6 packs of Dominaria, the new set, a week before the release here. You will get a deck box, a nice spin down die, and I didn't list this here because it's really not important to the actual like deck building process, because it shouldn't be important. It shouldn't influence you on deck building just yet. They're just kind of like nice bonuses, but you do get 2 promo cards with the date of the weekend, and of course the little like imprint of like Dominaria pre-release, that kind of thing. So those 2 are random. They could be really good cards. They could be really bad cards. Either way, you don't want to build your deck around that kind of archetype unless those cards fit into the other cards you have in your packs that you pull. To me, a pre-release is the most casual of formats. It's the easiest to get into as far as how to build the deck. Basically, you get 6 packs like you're just doing here, and then you put a 40 card deck together. Not a 60 card, you put 40 cards together, 17 or 16 lands depending on how your mana curve is. We'll talk about that in just a second, with 23 or 26 other cards in the deck list, being creatures, spells, enchantments, all that other kind of fun stuff. And to kind of help illustrate that, we actually have a nice graph here. This is like a deck mana curve that you kind of want to go by for a 40 card deck, or even like normally like a 60 card deck as well. It's a nice curve. It's kind of representing it here. On 1 mana or creatures we have 0 to 2. On 2 mana creatures we have 4 to 6. On 3 mana creatures is 3 to 5, 4, 2 to 4, 5, 1 to 3, and 6, 7, and 8. Those big bombs you have in the game, maybe 0 to 2, depending on how your deck is operating, how fast your deck is, and how like ramping or how quickly your mana can actually come together in your deck list. The biggest thing you want to keep in mind for sealed deck lists is that you only want to have maybe like 2 to 3 really good bombs, and everything else just be complete value creatures. And let's go over the colors here for our value creatures. Starting with white right here, we have the best commons in white right before your eyes. There are other cards that are good in white, but these are the ones that I like for white here, and there are 5. Here are Healing Grace, Adamant Will, Gideon's Reproach, Davenant Trapper, and Sergeant at Arms. These are 5 cards that I really like, that I will probably prioritize over other cards if I am in a sealed pool for white. The reason, of course, Healing Grace is a 1 white mana instant. Prevent the next 3 damage that would be dealt to any target this turn by a source of your choice. You gain 3 life. Now, at first glance, this card isn't that great, but it can prevent 3 damage to a creature you control, or even your face, or even a planeswalker on your side of the field if you happen to have a planeswalker on the board. You also gain 3 life as a kind of afterthought here, and it's only for 1 mana at instant speed. This is a great common for you, can hopefully kind of help you trade with a creature or survive some type of removal in red. Next up here we have Adamant Will, a 2 mana instant combat trick. Target creature is +2/+2 and gains indestructible until end of turn. There are a lot of combat tricks in sealed. Adamant Will is the best one, I would say, for at instant speed for us being able to block or being able to trade, or maybe even just kind of work around a piece of removal that our opponent is going to send our way if we're in white. Next card that's a really good removal spell is Gideon's Reproach here. A 2 mana instant, Gideon's Reproach deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. So if an opponent has a big creature coming out and they're only 4 or 3 toughness, we want to use Gideon's Approach and get that thing out of the way. We want to knock it right in the jaw and get it out of the battlefield. Next up is Davenant Trapper, a 3 mana 3/2 human archer. Whenever you cast a historic spell, tap target creature and opponent controls. So more often than not in white, you're going to have a lot of things where you want to have momentum going your way. The Trapper here is going to be amazing for us, especially if we have a lot of legendaries, artifacts, and sagas in our deck to hopefully kind of trigger the Trapper. If we can't, it's still a 3/2 that could actually trade with things like that are kind of 4 and 5 mana because of the 3 toughness there. So overall, even without the Trapper's ability being like going off turn over turn, the Trapper's like power and toughness is still pretty decent. The last card over here with commons is Sergeant at Arms, a 3 mana 2/3 human soldier with kicker for 3, so we can pay 3 or 6 for this creature. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. So it's a 2/3 for 3, which is not terrible, but not great. But if we pay 6 here, it's a 2/3 that gives us 2 1/1s, and that's really, really good because it does mean it widens our board state and helps us kind of go forward as far as being able to either block bigger attacks and maybe trade because we have more power in the battlefield. We have, 4 power spread across 3 creatures, or we can hopefully get in for some more damage if we need to land those last 1 or 2 points of damage for Sergeant at Arms. I think this card is really powerful, and again, we have like a combat trick, a nice protection spell, a good removal spell, a decent creature, and a great creature that goes wide. So that's kind of what I think are good cards for common and white. Let's go to uncommons here. We have Dauntless Bodyguard, probably one of the best uncommons in the set, a 1 mana 2/1 human knight. When it enters the battlefield, choose another target creature you control, sacrifice the Dauntless Bodyguard. The chosen creature gains indestructible until end of turn. I would call this a combat trick on a stick, basically. It's a 1 mana 2/1, which is actually not terrible, getting in for some damage really quickly, but it's also a great way to protect a large bomb you have on your side of the field too. So I really like the Bodyguard. Moving on from that though, in the 2 mana slot we have Seal Away, probably one of the best removal spells in white. There's a lot of removal in white as far as shutdown stuff, but Seal Away is probably one of the best that just does it just straight up. A 2 mana enchantment with Flash, which means we can cast it on our opponent's turn, which we want to. When Seal Away enters the battlefield, exile target tapped creature and opponent controls until Seal Away leaves the battlefield. So whenever they start attacking out, as soon as they tap for attacks, any kind of damage that goes your way, you can just completely seal away that creature, and that damage doesn't hit you at all. Seal Away is a fantastic card and a high draft pick for you, or a high sealed pick rather, in your sealed pool. Moving up here, we have Knight of Grace, a 2 mana 2/2 human knight with first strike. That alone is like ridiculously powerful. Oftentimes, if it's a 2 mana 2/2, or oftentimes if it's 2 mana 2 power first striker, it's gonna have 1 toughness. So it's actually lucky of us that it's actually just a bear with first strike, which is ridiculous. But it also has hexproof from black. Black is like the natural enemy of white here. And if any player controls a black permanent, the knight also gets +1/+0, so it's a 3/2 first striker. This card is ridiculous. This card is off the rails, amazing. Again, a very high draft pick, or a very high sealed pick. Can almost be better than some rares sometimes. I like this card a lot. Moving up beneath the Capuchin Paragon, a 3 mana 2/2, another bear kind of, but it's got first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. And those are 3 very relevant things on a 3 mana body. Aura and equipment spells you cast cost 1 colorless less to cast, so if we do have those in our board as well, they are cheaper to cast too, which is really good for us as well. This card is overall amazing as far as just having lots of keywords, lots of things to do. And our top end bomb here for us, Sarah Angel, just a classic, very classic top end bomb. 5 mana 4/4 flying vigilance. It's an uncommon. It's going to be a high pick for you in your sealed pool. I like this a lot, being a top end bomb, of course, for your deck if you're in white. Moving on to blue here, we have blue commons. Blue commons are very, very interesting. I think white obviously is one of the best colors in the sealed pool right now, as well as draft. But blue is I would say just more of a support color right now. We have a Syncopate here, a decent counter spell, X and blue instant, counter target spell unless this controller plays X. If this spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. So that alone is interesting if we can do that for sure. Opt is here for some like filtering, a 1 blue mana instant, scry 1, draw a card. I like the card a lot because it can help filter through your deck and it can help like get through some lands if you're in a mana pocket, stuff like that. Arcane Flight is one of the most powerful auras in the actual like sealed environment right now. A 1 blue mana enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. Flying is super powerful, guys. If we can do this on turn 2, that would be amazing on our like 1 or 2/1 Dauntless Bodyguard. This card is ridiculous for that very reason. Blink of an Eye is a 2 mana instant with kicker for 2. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If the spell was kicked, draw a card. So this is very good for 2 mana, but it's also kind of good for 4 mana if you want to draw some cards, hopefully getting some card advantage. Basically into the Royal here. The art's really fun too. I think this is a high like kind of removal spell in blue for us. Valdarian Arcanist here is also for like all of these like enchantments and or instants and sorceries we just talked about. A 1/3 2 mana, tap it, add colors to our mana pool, spend only to cast instant and sorcery spells. So if you notice here, there's kind of like a support theme here in blue. I think the Arcanist is very powerful in like the particular blue we have to play with as far as commons. I think it's nice that it actually has 3 toughness too, which means it can trade or like hopefully block a lot of damage coming our way in the early turn 1 through 3 kind of slot there. But what does uncommons hold for us in blue? Well, they get a little bit better here. We have Merfolk Trickster, a 2 blue 2/2 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature and opponent controls, it loses all abilities until end of turn. So this is basically a combat trick on a stick once again, but a very good creature if opponent is attacking in with a creature, or if we want to, you know, maybe tap down an opponent's creature to like use some red mana to maybe burn it, or maybe just like turn it off for a turn if we need to. So Trickster is very useful for that. It's also just a 2/2 bear, which is okay as well. Tetsuko, I put this in here for the, this is the Tetsuko Umezawa Fugitive here, a 2 mana 1/3. This is an interesting card because it's very situational, but I really like it for the sealed environment, especially if you get into a lot of 3/1s or 1/3s or 1/2s, stuff like that. Creatures you control with power or toughness, 1 or less, can't be blocked. You could probably build an unblockable deck around this sealed card. I think it's very powerful, and I think it will take opponents by surprise quite often. If you can get some kind of like protection spell on the Fugitive here, I think it's really going to come out and be like an all-star in your deck. Moving on here, we have Time of Ice, a 4 mana enchantment saga. Chapter 1 and 2, tap target creature and opponent controls. It doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Time of Ice, basically shutting down 2 creatures on our opponent's side of the field. Tap 3, return all tap creatures to their owner's hand. So if we have them tapped, they get bounced back into their owner's hand, so they're going to have to be recast. Keep in mind though, if we do tap down creatures that have enter the battlefield abilities, that's going to be kind of bad for us because it does mean they get a secondary like trigger off of them. So Time of Ice is really here to kind of shut down those big giant green dumb creatures that we don't like, that cost a lot of mana and basically take up their entire turn to cast. Moving on here, we have Weight of Memory. This is kind of a good draw spell for us. A 5 mana sorcery, draw 3 cards. Target player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. Jace's Ingenuity is great because it's an instant. This is not an instant, it's a sorcery, but we still get to draw 3 cards on our turn. I think in the mid to late game for blue, if you're kind of playing a lockdown strategy with things like Time of Ice, the Trickster, and this next card in Bolus's Clutches, I do think Weight of Memory is actually quite a good card to include in that particular pool. Speaking of in Bolus's Clutches here, this is a 6 mana legendary enchantment aura. You control enchanted permanent. Enchanted permanent is legendary, so very interesting for us. We can basically take anything on their side of the field, even a land if we need to, for 6 mana. We don't want to do that for sure. We want to make sure we can grab maybe a planeswalker, or maybe even just a big creature, or maybe even an artifact or another enchantment saga that we like that we can put on our side of the field. There was a similar card in Hour of Devastation that I really liked. It was similar to this. In Bolus's Clutches is very good because it's basically, you know, take their giant bomb for 6 mana, and if you have the mana to spend for it, I do think it's quite worth it. Moving on now to our best creatures or best commons in black, we have Blessing of Belzenlock. This is a 1 black mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+1 until end of turn. If it's legendary, it also gains lifelink until end of turn. So it's a nice combat trick. +2/+1 is decent, but if it's legendary, it also gets lifelink, which means it does mean that we have some life to gain from that little exchange. The only thing I'm kind of upset about this is that it's not +2/+2. It's +2/+1 is not as impactful. We might be able to just trade with this as well. So not a favorite of mine, but a favorite of mine that's right beside that is Stronghold Confessor here, a 1 black mana 1/1 with a kicker for 3 and Menace. If it was kicked, we put it on the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So a 4 mana 3/3 with Menace is actually quite good in the early to mid game there. And if you're bundling in black with green, as I think I might be if I get into a nice sealed pool for it, Confessor would be a great card to get into on turn 3 if you can ramp into it. Next card for us is Deathbloom Thaliad, a 3 mana 3/2 fungus. When the Thaliad dies, create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. So basically, a 3/2 is going to trade with something probably that's a 3 or 4 mana creature, and then we also get a 1/1 out of it. So we actually get a blocker as well as a second blocker. That's pretty decent for 3 mana. I think that's very, very nice. Another card that's just straight removal that we want to get into as quickly as possible is Eviscerate, a 3 colorless and 1 black mana sorcery. Destroy target creature. Very easy, very straightforward. But there was stuff in Rivals of Ixalan that was 2 black and like 2 colorless to do the same thing. I like that this is a lot more splashable in other colors. I do like this a lot, and of course the art here is ridiculously like gruesome. Cabal Paladin is our last uncommon here, a 4 mana 4/2 Human Knight. Whenever you cast a historic spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So a 4 mana 4/2 is actually not amazing because of the 2 toughness, but the ability to kind of like build historic stuff around it and have our opponent kind of drain for 2 life each time we cast our spells, that's really, really good for us. It's actually going to keep us on curve and keep us kind of draining our opponent turn after turn, even if we don't get to attack in. I think that's very powerful. But moving up to the uncommons in black, there are a ton of good uncommons in black. It's kind of hard to pick, honestly though, but we're going to narrow it down to 5 here. Knight of Malice is a 2 mana 2/2 Human Knight with first strike. Again, just like with the white one, very, very good on the curve. Hexproof from white, again, just like the white one, but now for white, it also gets +1/+0 as long as any player controls a white permanent. So if you're playing white-black, this is a 3/2 first striker. If you're not playing white-black and your opponent plays a white permanent, this is also a 3/2 first striker with Hexproof hexproof from white, so it's a very, very good card. Seal Away is not going to be able to target it because it's hexproof from white. Very good. Moving on to another card here, we have Cast Down, a 2-mana instant, destroy target non-legendary creature. This is basically, you know, a Doomblade for us that's instant speed against our opponent. It's not going to kill, obviously, their big, giant legendary bomb or whatever, but it will kill basically everything else, obviously, and I think that's very, very good. We'll see a lot of play in your sealed pool for sure. Settle the Score here is a 4-mana sorcery. Exile target creature, so if we can't destroy it with Cast Out or Cast Down, maybe we can destroy it with Settle the Score. Exile target creature, that's all you need to know. The 2 loyalty counter thing on Planeswalkers, that really doesn't matter that much for you unless you pull into a Planeswalker and Sealed, which you probably won't. If you do, congratulations you. Regardless, Settle the Score is just great for a 4-mana exile. We had Final Reward in Ravels for Ixalan. I think this card is much better than that, being for 4 mana. We have Lingering Phantom here, our giant bomb for black, a 6-mana 5/4 spirit. Whenever you cast a historic spell, you may pay 1 black, and if you do, return Lingering Phantom from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a card that if our opponent removes, it actually comes back, and it's a 5/4, meaning it has a lot of toughness for just 6 mana. So it's a great card. It doesn't have flying or any kind of trample or anything like that, but I do think it's very powerful, and that it can come back turn over turn if we have some historic cards in our deck list. And the last uncommon in here for black is Ogreros the Empty One, 6-mana 4/3 flyer, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card at random. If the player can't, you draw a card. So it's at random, which is decent for us because it does mean that they can't pick, which is good. And if they have an empty hand, we actually get to draw a card. So for 6-mana 4/3 hitting in, we get card draw and card advantage. That's ridiculous. The thing, of course, that I'm sad about is the 3 toughness, which this was like maybe even like a 2/4 or a 3/4. That would have been much better for me. I do like having tough or bigger and tougher creatures that are flyers. I do understand though this can trade with the 3/5 like Spider with Reach in green. So you want to keep in mind for that if you're playing against green, but I do think a 4/3 flyer is quite good regardless. Moving on to the other cards here for red. The commons for red, we have 5 cards here that are pretty good. Starting with Run Amok. This is one of the best combat tricks in the sealed pool right here. 2-mana instant. Target attacking creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. This card is going to end games. This card is so good. Make sure to get into multiples of them if you can in your sealed pool. It's just ridiculous. Next up here we have Frenzied Rage, a 2-mana enchantment aura. Enchant creature. It gets +2/+1 and has menace. It's similar to Run Amok. Even though it doesn't give trample, it still gives like pseudo evasion, which means that our opponent's going to have to double block whatever we put this on, which is very, very good. Another card that's good for us in common is Keldon Overseer, a 3-mana 3/1 human warrior with a kicker for 4, which means we can pay 3 or we can pay 7 if we want to with haste, so it has haste either way. And if it was kicked, we gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, gains haste until end of turn. The Overseer here is actually super interesting for us because we basically hold this into our hand until the mid to late game where we know we can win. Then we grab their big bomb on their side of the field and swing in with that as well. The Overseer for us is going to do a lot of good work for us if we have the 7 mana to sink into it. Moving on to a just okay kind of card, but a decent bomb for us if we need it. A 4-mana 4/3 Keldon Raider here. When it enters the battlefield, discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So it kind of gives like some nice filtering for us, which is decent in the mid to late game, but it's also a 4/3, which means it can do some significant damage to any kind of creature on our opponent's side of the field. And finally, next up, a card I feel like no one's really talking about just yet. Seismic Shift, a 4-mana sorcery. Destroy target land, puts our opponent behind 1 land, and up to 2 target creatures can't block this turn. The 2 target creatures basically means that our opponent is going to be able to lose this turn because they can't block with the creatures they have on the field. I love this card. I think it's a great combat trick. Even though it's a sorcery speed, it's basically saying, hey, do you have an answer to this? If you don't, I win this turn. I love Seismic Shift. It's a great common and something you might want to include in your sealed pool list. Next up here for uncommons in red, we have Orcish Vandal, a 2-mana 1/1. Really not much on the surface there, but we can sacrifice an artifact and deal 2 damage to any target. That includes a creature, a planeswalker, or an opponent's face, which, spoilers, that's what we want to do. We want to sacrifice artifacts and sling them at our opponent's face. Vandal is very good for that, and getting in the field on turn 2 is actually quite good for us if we have a lot of artifacts in our sealed pool. Moving on here, we have Wizard's Lightning, a 3-mana instant. It costs 2 colorless less to cast if you control a wizard, which we probably will since this is a sealed pool here, and we would be in red. Wizard's Lightning deals 3 damage to any target. This is basically a lightning bolt for uncommon against anything in the sealed pool, and I really like this a lot. Even for 3 mana, it's still decent. point. But another card that deals a lot of damage as well is Fight with Fire, a 3-mana sorcery with kicker for 6, which means we can pay 3 or we can pay 9. That's a lot of mana, but if Fight with Fire deals 5 damage to target creature, if this spell was kicked, it deals 10 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets instead. So if we pay the 3 mana, it deals 5 to a creature, but if we deal the 9, it deals 10 damage to an opponent's face. That can be a giant blowout for sure. I would say to kind of use this kind of like as like a bombard that we used in Ravos Rixalan. It's a good sealed card for sure, but I do think getting up to 9 mana for the kick here is really difficult. I would say play that in a Gruul list for sure, a green-red list automatically. Another decent card that's a little overpriced for my liking is the Fire Fist Adept, a 5-mana 3/3 human wizard. When it enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to target creature an opponent controls, where X is the number of wizards you control. So if you kind of have a lot of wizards in your deck from blue and red, or an Izzet list here, you could possibly do maybe 2, maybe even 3 points of damage to a creature on your opponent's side of the field. So hopefully killing it, which is actually quite nice. 4-mana 3/3 kill something, that's pretty decent for us. I like that a lot. If not, it's going to be 4 mana, excuse me, it's 5 mana, not 4 mana, but we still pay 5 mana, make it 3/3, and maybe hopefully kill something. So that's the goal here, but if it's just coming on the field by itself, it's a 5-mana 3/3, then maybe ping something, and that's fine too. But another card I love if you're really ahead in the match here is Warcry Phoenix. This card is so powerful if you're ahead in the matchup. A 4-mana 2/2 flyer with haste. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you may pay 3 mana. If you do, return Warcry Phoenix to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. So this is a really good card if you're ahead on the curve. I think this card is definitely going to go into like, you know, a red-white or maybe in a red-green kind of list here where you're attacking with lots of small creatures like Saprolings or something like that. You can bring Warcry Phoenix back. It's a flyer in haste, so it can come back and just start swinging for your opponent's face. Really powerful. I do think it's a little expensive for 4 mana, but I do think if we can get it to the graveyard and bring it back over and over again, I think it's really powerful that way. Moving on up to some more colors here, we have green commons here. We have Gift of Growth, another combat trick, but for green. A 2-mana instant with kicker for 2. Untap target creature gets +2/+2 into a turn. If it was kicked, it gets +4/+4 into a turn. So 2 mana to get +2/+2 untap creature, that's not bad. I think that's pretty decent, but being able to play 4 mana give +4/+4 untap creature, that's even better. Most of the time you're going to use this aggressively and not necessarily how they want you to use it, which is going to be, you know, kind of defensively with untap target creature. However, it still means your creature is getting in for damage, maybe having weird like vigilance for the turn. I still like this card either way. Another card I'm a big fan of here is Broken Bond, a 2-mana sorcery. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. You may play a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So in the early games here, if they have a land or enchantment or a saga on the battlefield, we can definitely use Broken Bond, get rid of it on our turn, and then we can play a land right after that for free. Broken Bond is really, really good for that. And again, having the ability to play multiple lands in a single turn is very, very powerful, and I would not look over it. Just like this card right here, Grow from the Ashes, a 3-mana sorcery with a kicker for 2. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and that's untapped, by the way. Then shuffle your library. If that spell was kicked, instead search your library for 2 basic lands, put those onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So if you're looking for a way to get into big bombs, Grow from the Ashes is going to be a way for just 5 mana. That's amazing. Love this card. I think it's very, very powerful, especially in a sealed pool if you have a lot of nice big bombs or bombs you maybe want to kick in the mid to late game. Moving on here, we have Yavimaya Shepherd. This is a 3-mana 2/2 fungus. When it enters the battlefield, it gives us a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. This is basically like the Jungleborn Pioneer from Ravos Rixalan. It's very good. You're going to pick it all the time in your sealed pool. I think some people kind of undervalue things that make other creatures, but I do like going wide here. I do like getting out as much power as we possibly can, and the Shepherd here helps us do that. Another card though that isn't necessarily going wide, it's just going big here, is the Baloth Gorger, a 4-mana 4/4 with kicker for 4. And if it enters the battlefield, you get 3 +1/+1 counters on it, making it a 7/7, but of course you pay 8 mana for that. So a 7/7 for 8 is not terrible in the mid to late game, but a 4/4 for 4 in like the early to mid game is very, very good. Do not undervalue this card at all. A 4-mana 4/4 is just gravy. But moving up to uncommons for green though, we have Fungal Plots. This is kind of a personal favorite of mine. I know it probably won't be that great, but I do like talking about this card quite a bit. It's a 2-mana enchantment. We can pay to exile a creature card from our graveyard, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. We can sacrifice 2 Saprolings, you gain 2 life and draw a card. So I do think if you get into a sealed pool where you have a lot of fungus, a lot of Saprolings, things like that, the Plots here is actually going to be very powerful for you, as it can make sure that you actually have a life gain coming in as well as card advantage. It's just super powerful in being able to do multiple number of things. Moving on here, we have Untamed Kavu, a 2-mana 2/2, a bear, which is not too bad, but a kicker for 3 here, being able to pay 5 mana for it, has Vigilance and Trample either way, and if it was kicked, it comes in the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on it, so pay 5 mana, get a 5/5 Trample Vigilance, that's decent. The best thing I really enjoy about this card is that it's very flexible, so if we need it in the early game, we can definitely do it in the early game as a 2/2 bear with Vigilance and Trample, that's fine, but if we have the patience and we do draw into it in the mid to late game, we can pay the 5 mana and get a 5/5 Vigilance Trampler. That's amazing. That's going to be a card that might end the game for you on your side of the field. Moving on to another card that might end the game for you is a Song of Prerelease, a 2-mana enchantment saga, chapter 1 and 2, until end of turn, creatures you control gain tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So very simple, very straightforward, a very good way to kind of wrap into whatever you need to do. And chapter 3, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible until end of turn. For 3 turns here, if you get this out on turn 2, is amazing. I think it's very, very powerful. I think it's a card that a lot of people probably might undervalue a lot, especially because it does take time to develop the board state for this card. But if you do get it developed and you do have the turns to go through this, I think this card is going to win you the match immediately as soon as you hit chapter 3. And also, since we have a lot of creatures that need kickers here, another way to helpfully get to that is the Elfheim Druid here, a 2-mana 0/2 elf druid. We can tap it to add 1 green mana to our mana pool. That alone is pretty decent, or we can tap it to add 2 green mana to our mana pool, spend this mana only to cast kick spells. So very good for us in the sealed pool, especially because we have a lot of creatures that will have, you know, an insanely high costed kicker ability. We have the Druid here to hopefully kind of mitigate that in green. And lastly, in the uncommon slot, I couldn't not talk about this creature. This is Grun the Lonely King, a 6-mana 5/5 with kicker for 3. So if we want to pay 9 mana, we can definitely do that. But if it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 5+1/+1 counters on it, which is turning it into a 10/10, and that's insane. And whenever it attacks alone, double its power and toughness into end of turn. So it's attacking in for 20 if you did kick it for 9 mana. So this is a card that can definitely end the game in one single stroke if it's got an opening. But that is all the cards in green. I do like green a lot. I'll definitely rate all the colors at the end of this video for sure. But let's move on to kind of like the random cards you might not see that much of as far as gold, gold cards, multicolor cards or artifacts in the deck list here. 2 cards that I really liked of artifacts were the Jousting Lance and Icy Manipulator. Jousting Lance here, a 2-mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0, and as long as it's your turn, it also has First Strike, which is very, very good, and equipped for 3. So I like this card a lot, especially if you like being aggressive. Icy Manipulator here is a 4-mana artifact. We can pay 1, tap it, tap target artifact, creature, or land. I like this card a lot, especially if we have the mana to get this out super soon, so like turn 4 or even turn 3 if we're ramping. I do like this a lot because it can shut down a large creature on an opponent's side of the field, or maybe even shut down a very specific land that we don't want them tapping as well. Like if they need red mana and they only have 1 red land, let's tap it down because they can't use that, you know. Moving on to some gold cards, we have Shanna Sisay's Legacy, a 2-mana 0/0 legendary creature, human warrior. It can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control, so basically hexproof here, but it gets a +1/+1 for each creature you control. So if you have a wide board state and if you're ahead, this card is very good, but if you're not, it's very bad. You definitely want to kind of use this card sparingly. If it's the only creature on the battlefield, it's just a 1/1 that can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponent control. That's interesting. I do like this card quite a bit. Next up for us, we have Adeliz the Cinderwind, a 3-mana 2/2 flying hasty. Whenever you cast an instant and sorcery spell, wizards you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So again, another card that kind of rewards us if we're into the Is It Wizards list here in Sealed. If we get into this card and we have a lot of wizards on the battlefield, it basically pumps our entire board, and that's very powerful too. And lastly, we have Arvad the Cursed, a 5-mana 3/3 legendary creature, Vampire Knight, with Death Touch and Lifelink. That alone is pretty decent, but other legendary creatures you control get +2/+2. So again, if you have a lot of legendaries you got into in your sealed pool, Arvad here kind of rewards you with that by giving you a lot of good things to use with it, and of course pumping your board. But that's basically all the cards that I want to talk about as far as like the best commons and uncommons of each color. Basically just narrowed it down to each 5 cards. I know a lot of you wanted me to talk about maybe rares for sealed, but I really don't think you're going to get into too many, of course. You'll probably get into, 6, your 2 that you get in your pack, and then maybe a foil perhaps. Basically what I'm trying to say is sealed really isn't meant to be kind of like rare focused. If you get into a bomb rare and it's in colors you can use, that's very, very good. If not, you definitely want to kind of stay away from it and put it in your binder or in your box and kind of let it sit there for a while during the pre-release. My biggest pieces of advice, as always, is to make sure that when you look at your cards in your 6 packs, you want to kind of separate them by color and say, what are the ones that have the most color of, like if it's green or red or black or whatever, and say, okay, do I want to play this? Or is the synergy within these 2 colors or this one color? Because most of the time you're going to be playing 2 colors. Going into 3 colors in this particular set is not recommended for sure. Go into 2 colors if you can help it, and try to focus down your deck. Again, you're going to have 16 to 17 lands in your deck, so that means you're going to have 24 to 23 other cards in your deck that are creatures, spells, enchantments, enchantments, things like that. A good number I like to use for creatures as far as how my curve goes for a 40 card deck is between 14 and 15 creatures. That only leaves like 8 slots, or maybe even 9 slots or 7 slots there for you to use spells, artifacts, enchantments, other abilities like that within your deck. And the reason I do that is because the 40 card deck lists here in Sealed and even Draft are very, very focused on being able to get out as much damage as possible against your opponent as quickly as possible. And if you don't have any kind of like way to do that, you want to kind of make sure that if you have the spells, use removal as much as you can. Another good policy I would also use is the bread policy, and that is bombs, removal, evasion, aggro, and dirt or duds. Bombs, of course, being your giant creatures, the things that you want to end the game with. Removal hopefully being cards that you want to play against your opponent to remove their bombs. Evasion for things like flying, trample, things like that where you can kind of get around your opponent's creatures. Aggro because you want to have a low mana curve on your 40 card deck. And of course, dirt, because you don't want to play those cards in your deck list. As of right now, as far as power ranking for me, I do think black and white are kind of up there. Probably white being the best, followed by black, then green, then red's pretty good, and then blue is up again at the bottom. Most of the time, blue is the worst, and this is no exception here. I do think, however, black, green, and white are very, very close for like competing at the top. Red is also good, but it's a good support color. What are the colors like green and black? Another thing I would like to talk about, of course, is this last slide here, which is things to bring on site to your local game store. And we'll kind of go through this really quickly here. So things you might not want to bring, but you might want to think about before you go to your local game store is you want to eat before you go to a pre-release, because you're going to be there for like, 4 to 5 hours perhaps. If you're going to a midnight, you might be exhausted. You might need some coffee in your system or some caffeine in your system. Make sure to be like well hydrated and also, full of food because you don't want to be going in the middle of a match and feel exhausted, feel hungry, that kind of stuff. You want to eat either before you get there or when you get to a local game store. Say, hey, do you guys offer food? Do you have food at your local game store? Or if there's a store that sells food near you, grab some, make sure you have some so you're not like hangry the entire time. Next up for you want to have card sleeves. These are very important for you. Either buy them at the local game store when you get there or bring your own. I like to bring my own 40 card sleeves. Again, it's a 40 card deck, so you can buy just a 50 card pack here, or you can buy a 60 card pack, whatever you want, and just kind of put the excess in the deck box you receive, or bring your own deck box, things like that. Card sleeves are very important because you don't want to be playing a 40 card deck with like your own, the cards outside of a sleeve, because you're going to bend them, you're going to warp them, and if someone spills a drink, God forbid, you might actually ruin your card that you just got in your pre-release. So make sure to get sleeves for your cards. Some other things to include besides like sleeves, you could also include like a deck box, but they do give you a deck box, also a spin down die. But one thing you might want to put on your list or think about bringing too is maybe a bunch of like 6-sided die as well for counters on your creatures too. There are quite a few cards in green that do give +1/+1 counters, so you do want to be aware of that and make sure you're not going into a deck blind and saying, to your opponent across the table, hey, can I borrow your dice? That's probably not a good move for you. Of course, if it's a nice local game store, they should be willing to share their dice with you. Next up here, we have a notebook. Make sure to bring a notebook. The spin down die is nice to keep track of your life total, but sometimes your opponent doesn't like to keep track of their life total, or maybe they like to keep track of it and someone knocks it with their elbow or something. Make sure to have a notebook right beside you to keep track of your life total while you're going throughout the match, so if someone forgets, you can always kind of look down and reference the notebook there. Very, very useful for you, and for me personally, I like to bring one so I can doodle in between matches. And the last one here is, bring a happy attitude. This is Happy from Fairy Tale. Bring a happy attitude to a local game store during a pre-release. This is the most casual event. Don't try to be a spike hardcore player with a sealed event. If you do win first place, that's great within your sealed events, your sealed matches. But if you don't, that's fine too. These are all random cards in a sealed pool. And if you don't do that great, that's perfectly fine. You still have the opportunity to play with a brand new set a week before the release of the official set. That's a lot of fun, and that's why you go to pre-releases. But that's going to do it for this video today, guys. I hope you did like it. I hope it did help you. I know I kind of tried to talk a little fast to try and get through as many things as possible, but I did want to try and make a video as short as I possibly could for the pre-release event and make sure that you guys know what to expect, what cards are good, what cards are bad, what cards to pull into, what cards to see in your sealed pool, and what best practicing standards you can use to hopefully enjoy your pre-release to the best of your ability. But that's going to do it for this video today, guys. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.